Hi everyone and welcome to the Disney Q&A. This is the series in which you guys send me all sorts of Disney questions, whether it's about the history or the theme parks or the animations, and I try to give you answers to the best of my ability. As always, we're here on mcmagic.us, the one-to-one scale recreation of Disney World in the game of Minecraft, and we're going to walk around and explore a bit while we answer some questions. So without further ado, let's just dive right in. First question comes from It's Always Disney Time, which is, I guess, a good time to have. I guess you don't need a watch, right? And the question is, our family is a family of 5, and that makes choices of where to stay at Disney World very limited. We've looked at going into a suite at the Art of Animation Resort. The problem we're having is the fact that it's in the value resorts category, and we're worried that it'll be too far away from the parks. We're also worried that the recreation and amenities won't be as good as other resorts we've stayed in. Should we save the 700 pounds and squeeze into Port Orleans again? So this is an interesting question because I think there are a lot of variables that sort of factor into what the proper answer would be. For instance, what is your family of 5 like? Are is it 2 parents and then 3 full-grown siblings who are, teenagers going into adulthood? If that's the case, you might want to spring for the suite so that you have a little bit more space. But if they're young children, then maybe that's not so much an issue because you can, comfortably have the 2 kids in a bed, and, that sort of plays into it to an extent. I think there's also the question of what you're looking for in this vacation. Now, I know you mentioned 700 pounds, which means you're coming from overseas, which means maybe you don't come out to Disney as often as people who might live in the Florida area, in which case maybe for you it's more important to have a more leisurely experience, in which case, then maybe Port Orleans is a factor again, because I do think a moderate resort like Port Orleans, while, the values are still really great and they're a good place to go and stay, because there are more rooms and more people staying there, they can be louder, they could be more crowded, whereas a Port Orleans has a nice quiet atmosphere. So, you have to balance that into it. Now, that said, it sounds like you haven't been at a value resort before, and I can say that things like travel aren't as big of an issue. I mean, there's a bus system. The buses, I think, travel fairly frequently. Depending on which value resort you're staying at might depend on what stop you are in the bus stops. But again, I'm a little biased. I come from New York City. Public transportation is something I deal with every single day. So for somebody who's commuting 40 minutes each way to go to work, the idea of 20 minutes to take a bus to the theme parks doesn't seem like that big of a deal. However, if it is a big of a deal for you, also keep in mind that these moderates like Port Orleans also run on the bus system, unless you're, in these deluxe resorts like the Poly or, the Contemporary, where you have monorail access. Odds are you're going to have to wait a while to travel anyway. So I don't think that should be a big factor. I think really for you guys, I think you should balance the sort of peace and quiet that comes with a moderate resort with the sort of stress-free atmosphere that comes with having the extra space of a family suite. So I think you need to really balance that out to make that sort of decision. But my stance is with Disney, like, there's no wrong decision. Like, even if you end up in a suite at a value resort, they're still really well themed. They still have the pools, easy access to getting to all of these parks. So it's still going to be a great experience. It's just a matter of what you prefer. Next question comes from Twitter, and it comes from Twitter user Zombek Tech, who says, in China, there's a theme park that looks a lot like a Disney park, but it isn't. It's got poor theming, mascots taking off their heads. If you were president of this park, how would you manage it? Do you have any feelings towards this park? Thanks and have a great day. So the park in question, I think you're talking about, and I'm probably going to butcher the pronunciation, so I apologize, but I believe the park you're thinking of is the Beijing Xinjiangshan Amusement Park, which is an amusement park in Beijing, and it very much is a Disney ripoff. I mean, I saw the castle when I was looking at photos of it, and it seems like, okay, I think at that point the look of the Disney castle is so ubiquitous that it's hard to be shocked. But like, they even have, I believe, a rip-off Spaceship Earth in this park, so they very clearly are just, ripping off Disney. And they really straddle that line between copyright infringement and trademark infringement. And there's the issues of it being in China where you can't really enforce it as strictly. And so, the short story is they get away with it. What would I do if I was managing it? I don't know. I guess shut it down, because it seems like a really awful theme park. There's this great article on a website called Asia Obscura that you can check out in the description below that sort of looks over all of the parts of these parks, and you see photos of it. And it's like, for a ripoff, it's a really low quality ripoff, like beyond people taking their heads off and things like that. It's just like very cheap quality. So I wouldn't want to manage that. I'd probably quit my job or sell it or something. And have my feelings toward it. I mean, it's going to happen. I think you're going to see these already low popularity parks become even less popular, because we already have a Disney park in China, and we're going to have a second Disney park in China opening up soon. So, I think eventually when the real thing is that close, then why go to these knockoffs? Our next question comes from Daniel Burns, who asks, "Hey Rob, what do you think of BB-8? Of course, by BB-8, he's referring to the new roly-poly droid from Star Wars Episode 7 that rolls on a ball and has the little R2 looking head on top. I think it's a pretty cute looking droid. I mean, we haven't seen a whole lot of it in the trailers yet, so who knows how the personality is going to be and how that's going to, factor in with droids like C-3PO and R2-D2, but I think it's pretty cool. You know what? If it's meant to be a new form of comedic relief to sort of balance with R2 and C-3PO, still right off the bat, way better than Jar Jar Binks was. So it's got that going for it. Now, the first company to successfully start selling these droids in like toy form is going to make so much money. I know there's a startup that's going to try, but once we see like an actual prototype and you get that price to like $150 or less, or $100 or less, man, it's just going to be printing money. Our next question comes from Adam Road, who says, "I used to have a PC game that was similar to Roller Coaster Tycoon, but it was all based on Disney rides. I forget the title of it, as it's been a long time since I've played it. But are you familiar with this? And if so, do you see Disney trying to delve into the gaming world like this again?" So I think the game you're talking about is called Ultimate Ride Coaster Disney Edition. It was sort of like a Roller Coaster Tycoon-esque game. I've never played it myself. I've looked at it. I've seen videos of it. And they did have like a branded Disney version of it. Do I think they'll get into that again? Never say never. I think it's a good first step to see that Disney is working with publishers like EA to make all of these Star Wars games. And I'm hoping that if that goes well, we can see Disney step more into that realm for Disney games. Right now, I don't think we're seeing a whole lot outside of some mobile stuff in Disney Infinity. And I'm hoping Bob Iger or whoever is in charge over there of their, interactive department can see that you can have a successful Disney Infinity platform and still get into more traditional video games. And I would love to see that. I'd love to see an expansion for like a Roller Coaster Tycoon. I know Roller Coaster Tycoon World or the new Roller Coaster Tycoon's coming out soon. I'd love to see a branded expansion that offers, Disney branded stuff. As long as it's priced right and implemented right, I think that'd be a lot of fun. I think that's something we would all want to do. But I think we should have games like this, because look at MC Magic. Look at what you've done with the game of Minecraft to just recreate Disney. And we see all these other theme park servers that create their own attractions. And so I think having more tools to do stuff like that would be fantastic. Our next question comes from Push Bobby, who says, "I have 2 questions this week. How do you think the new Star Wars Battlefront will compare to the first 2? Will you do a Let's Play of Battlefront? And with the release of Star Wars 7 trailer, people think it will be the all-time best money-making movie ever, better than Avatar. What are your thoughts?" So, to your first question, I have no clue with Battlefront. It seems like a more watered-down version of Battlefront because they had less time to put it together. There's no space battles, less maps. They're already talking about DLC. But we'll have to see. We'll have to see how it comes out. I'm sort of interested. Will I do a Let's Play? It depends on if I get it. EA and DICE specifically, with their track record with Battlefield, has become a developer where I don't give them the benefit of the doubt anymore. I wait for the game to come out. I wait to see what state the game is in before I decide to buy it, which is a good practice to have. And with things like the awful launch that was Battlefield 4 back when it came out, I have no interest in getting it on day one. So we'll have to see how it all comes out. As for Star Wars 7 being the best money-making movie ever, better than Avatar, it depends on a lot of things. First off, are you going to adjust for inflation? Because if you adjust for inflation, Avatar is not even the best money making. That still goes to Gone with the Wind. And the problem is, likely when you adjust for inflation, nothing's probably going to be Gone with the Wind, because it was a different era where people weren't competing with, all these other forms of entertainment, video games and television and the internet. People went to the movies. And so, also that movie was in theaters for like years, as opposed to now where a movie's in theaters for a couple of months. But if you're not adjusting for inflation, I still think it might have problems beating Avatar. And again, it comes down to the sort of atmosphere of when the movie's released. Avatar was a movie that came out when 3D was a new novelty, or a renewed novelty. So it was being pushed as, this is the definitive 3D film. It came out at a point where, because of the 3D film, going to see it in IMAX in 3D meant your ticket cost you like $20, sometimes more. And if somebody who goes see Star Wars on a 2D screen, they're paying outside of the cities, maybe $7-10. So just by that, factor alone, that's a lot less money coming in. So it depends, and it depends on what time of year it's coming out. I know Avatar and Star Wars will be coming around at the same time of year, but it also depends on what else is coming out around these movies. So, I mean, it's got a shot more than any other film out there, I think, but it's gonna be tough. I think it'll be really successful. I don't know if it's gonna break Avatar's records. I think Avatar had a lot of hype going for it. We'll see. I hope so. I love Star Wars. I would love to see it become the king, the movie and the throne again. Our next question comes from Bfish Alex Imagineering, who asks, do you think that the chicken exits of attractions should not be themed at all? So if guests in question had a medical issue, such as they suffered from panic attacks, it would pull them out of the situation completely. Great question. I think so. I think you gave a perfect reason as to why. And as far as I know, I haven't used a whole lot of chicken exits in my life, but from my memory, that's what they do. I remember being younger, and the one time I used a chicken exit and was when I chickened out of the Tower of Terror. Now, the chicken exit required getting in an elevator. So considering the theme of the Tower of Terror and being a kid who was afraid, I was petrified, even though that elevator was not themed at all. I was afraid, like, oh, is this part of the experience? Are they tricking me? But it was themed like a totally normal elevator, and, they dropped the whole scary bellboy theme. So, yeah, I think they should be, and I think they are for the most part, and I think you gave a perfectly good reason as to why. You also asked, in my opinion, Dinoland USA in the Animal Kingdom is somewhat confused. My question is, what do you think the Imagineers should do with the area to unify it? Great question, because I have an episode of Revisiting Disney that talks just about that, specifically how to retheme the entirety of Dinoland USA. So you can go check it out, and my thoughts are all in that video, so nice and neatly wrapped in that. Our next question comes from Susan Bismack, and our answer comes from somebody who's not me. Susan Bismack asks, do you think Everest will be refurbished so the Yeti could swing at the track again? Now, rather than I answering it, somebody in the comments actually already gave a really good answer, and it's actually the answer I probably would have given. So rather than me giving one, I'm just going to read their answer. So Class Mammalia says, the problem with fixing the Yeti is that the movement of the animatronic was creating cracks in the supports that hold the figure up. If they had allowed it to keep going, the whole thing would have eventually collapsed. The supports are hidden behind rockwork that will have to be completely removed, and the ride will have to close for at least 6 months while they gut the interior and replace the supports with something that won't break so easily. Because Expedition Everest is still the most popular attraction at Animal Kingdom, I don't expect them to be able to start refurbishments until the Avatar Land is well established in drawing guests away from Everest. I would guess that winter 2016 is the earliest they could start working on it. Perfect. That's a perfect answer. I have nothing to add to that. That's exactly that. So great answer, class. Our next question comes from VoltSwitch97, who asks, I have a question for the Q&A. What would happen if I got a drone and flew it into Adventureland or Discovery Island and Water Country? Would I get banned from Disney, or would nothing happen to me? So, of course, Volt is probably talking about these new, growing in popularity, mini drones that have cameras attached to it that you can control with like a smartphone or an iPad or something like that. I would 100% advise against doing this. Do not do this. One, yes, You will probably get banned if you're caught doing this, but it goes far beyond just getting banned from the parks. Here's the thing, since 9/11, there actually has been called it's a TFR, a temporary flight restriction, placed over Disneyland and Disney World. I think it's funny that it's called temporary because it's been going for 15 or 14 years now, but there is an restricted airspace over these two parks, so nothing could fly over it unless it is sort of allowed by Disney, because they're considered, you know, possible terrorist threats. And in 2014, Disney's TFR was actually updated to include and prohibit unmanned and remote controlled aircraft, which is what your drones are. So not only are you facing getting banned from Disney World if you get caught with this, you could face some fees, and possibly, depending on your age and the seriousness of it, you could face jail time. So yeah, do not bring your drones to Disney. Do not try and fly them and get away with it. You can get in major trouble. I would highly suggest against it. As cool as that footage would look, not worth the risks. Our next question comes from NatNatDancer83001, who says, "Hey Rob, if you could be any Disney character in the parks, who would you be? Thanks and have a magical day." I thought about this one, and maybe this won't count as an answer, but I would want to be Push. I think Push would be fun to do. Obviously not something you get inside of like a Goofy or a Mickey Mouse, but I think it'd be fun to do. I've always liked trying to find Push's handler when Push was out and about, and I know Push isn't running anymore, but you know, in this dream world, they'll bring back Push just for me. But I always like trying to find the handler whose hand was just like subtly in the pocket of a bag with the remote control and with their hand up with a mic nearby. And I think it'd be fun to try and pull that off. So I would want to be Push. And that's the question of the week for you guys. If you could be a Disney character in the parks, who would you want to be? Let me know in the comments below. Now, before we get to this week's final question, first, let me, thank you all for watching. If you have a question that you would like to leave and have me answer for another future episode, feel free to leave it in the comments below. You could tweet me at RobPlays. You could also mail it to me now because I have a P.O. Box, and you could mail it to me at Rob Plays That Game, P.O. Box 864079, Queens, New York, 11386. And you can also get that off of my website, robplaysthatgame.com. Okay, on to our last question. It comes from Andrew Sellier, who asks, do they use the magic bands for lost children in the park? Like, do they have the technology to do that since they're able to track movement? Great question. I don't think they have an official stance where they say that it's something that they can offer, but I believe everything we know about the magic bands leads us to believe that yes, it's technologically possible, because we are putting personal information on these bands. Of course, we can control how much or how little we're providing. Usually it could just be name or where you're from. People are putting their credit cards and their room keys on it. But if you've, in theory, got the person's name on there, and they do have long distance readers so that they can track it, it wouldn't be far-fetched to imagine that their system would be able to keep a lookout for a certain guest, so that if, you know, little Johnny is lost in Fantasyland and he walks by It's a Small World, and the Small World reader picks up little Johnny, it'll flag it to them and go, hey, we found little Johnny by It's a Small World, and then they can then pass that on to security or, you know, any other cast members who could keep an eye out for little Johnny, who for some reason he wants to go on It's a Small World all the time. What's up with that, little Johnny? Like, your family's over in Adventureland. Go on the Jungle Cruise. Anyway, thanks for everybody's questions. Have a great week, and I'll see you next time for the next Disney Q&A. Bye, everybody.